So I will invite now Ciara Green to talk about how people at GDS redesign government around user needs, please.
Thank you. Hello, can everyone hear me okay? Is this turned on? Yeah. I'm Ciara Green. I'm a senior user researcher at GDS. Let's just test this out. It's really nice to be here. Thanks very much for the invitation to come to World Usability Day. So I'm going to talk to you, give you an overview of what we do at Government Digital Service in the UK, and then go into more detail about some examples of services that we've developed and have been part of the digital transformation of government in the past 5 years. So I'll start by talking about what we do. So we're about 500 people at the moment, 5 years old. We've grown very, very quickly. We're a mixture of designers, web developers, user researchers like myself, business analysts, economists, a real variety of disciplines, all working under Government Digital Service, which itself is part of the Cabinet Office. So the Cabinet Office is the bigger government department that really takes care of making sure that government itself is functioning. Okay, so before I go into too much about what we do, I'm going to give you a bit of history of Government Digital Service. So to just go back in time to give you an idea of when exactly we started, it was only 5-6 years ago, but it was when the first iPad was invented. So you can kind of think, even though this was really very recently, the kind of mini generation almost in digital development since we actually started. So this was a time when in the UK there were still just lots and lots of government websites. So we had this thing called DirectGov, composed of about 300 websites, and while some of them might have actually been okay, they might have been quite good, some not so good, the whole problem with them was that you had to know which bit of government you wanted to deal with at any one time. If you were seeking out some help, or you needed a service, or you needed some information, the way that DirectGov really worked was that you really needed to know how government worked in order to be able to access the things you wanted. So the internet was really part of the fabric of the nation at the time, as it is now, of course. It was very much part of the fabric of the nation, but not part of the fabric of government. While some attempts had been made in the 90s to try and change how the internet was used in government, it hadn't been very successful. So this lady, Martha Fox, was really integral to the whole project of GDS. What happened was, in 2010, the Cabinet Office Minister, Frances Mode, went to Martha Fox, who is was quite an influential lady in government. So she's an internet entrepreneur. She founded lastminute.com. She's on the board of Twitter. And she was named the UK's digital inclusion champion. So she did a lot of work to try and help people improve their digital literacy. So she was an influential lady in government. So the Cabinet Minister, Frances Mode, went to Martha Fox and said, can you do an investigation into DirectGov and find out how we can improve it? Can you help us do some research and write some recommendations, give us some guidance on how we can improve DirectGov for everyone? So she responded with an 11-page letter. So the first thing she says in this letter is that she didn't do the task that she was asked to do. So she didn't do a review of DirectGov and then write some recommendations on how to improve DirectGov. She scrapped the brief, and instead she did a wider investigation into how the government could use the internet very differently in order to improve services. The second thing that's interesting about this report is that it's an 11-page letter. It's not a Chilcot report style thing that's wheeled in on a trolley to advise the government on how to change their services. It was very short and it was very succinct. And most of what's in there, you can see how it's reflected in what GDS is today. So the three main things she talked about was moving to a single domain, gov.uk, that everything is underneath, with similar style and branding and allowing the public to not have to know how government works in order to access any part of government. The second thing she says that she wanted there to be a centre for policy and guidance on how to develop government services. So a kind of a place where people could just work on the development of design for GovUK and then disseminate that information out wider into services around the country. The third thing she said was that it has to be a revolution, not an evolution, because this is the title of the letter. So it wasn't really about, let's look at what we're doing now and see how we can improve that. It's, let's think completely outside the box of what has been done before and come up with something very new. And then, miraculously, the cabinet minister said yes, and then GDS was born. Okay, so to just talk you through the system that government in the UK, as many governments around the world, had functioned. So what had happened before is that some smart person somewhere in government would write a piece of policy, okay? And then this would go into long, long requirement documents being written that not many people would read, that would be commissioned to a company in order to build something. Then it would move into very long contractual negotiations that could actually take years before anything even started being built. And then the thing would be built. And then, if we were lucky, it might be tested out on a few people, slightly before launch, maybe after launch. And so what the user actually needed was kind of an afterthought, something that was considered towards the end. And another really significant thing about this model is that there is an end. It's thought of a project that finishes and then there's launch. Maintenance is just as much of a difficult scenario in this model. So the way Martha Lane Fox wanted it to be transitioned to, which is the way we work at GDS mostly, is that you start with user needs. So you start with trying to frame the problem with the idea that you don't really understand what necessarily is going on or what the solution could be. Then you move into this phase of alpha, which is where you're really just trying out different ideas, nothing's actually public yet. Then you go into beta, where you continue to iterate, it's still in a test format, and you collect lots of feedback, and you do a lot of iterations to improve the service. And then you go to live, and you're a live service, you're not officially under test anymore, but testing still continues. And we try and think of live as just the beginning. Even though we start with user needs, the beginning of the actual launch, there's been a long, long process of continued engagement with users to learn on how to improve it. Okay, so this is the earliest picture I could find of what GovUK looked like. And if some of you have seen GovUK, it might look a bit familiar. The start page is still there. Notice that it was called ukgov.gov.uk when it was being prototyped. What do you want to do? Yeah, so here, so let's fingers crossed this actually works. Okay, so that's GovUK, and it very recently had its 4th birthday. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about the transformation programme. After GovUK first started being built, it was built by a very small team. GDS was very, very small, 5-6 years ago. But after the success of GovUK and seeing that the brand and the content design seemed to work very well and it was really meeting user needs, wanted to embark on a programme to really start the transformation of government. And while I've talked about GDS being, the centre for the policy and guidance of the GovUK domain, it's really not about, GDS as some designers over there who are coming up with the ways that we should do things and then tell government what to do or design all the services themselves. It was really about wanting to go out to service teams around the country, so the people who build the services or work with the companies that were building the services, and transform them from the inside. So empower them and get them to be able to follow the design guidelines and develop successful services that met user needs. So I'm going to start with I'm going to give you a couple of examples. There's the carers allowance, which was considered one of the more successful ones of the transformation programme. So the carers allowance is if you are caring for someone more than 35 hours of the week, you'd be entitled to a carers allowance. But the thing about this before is that it was just a very, very long, difficult process to actually apply for this. And a story that I've heard from the user research that had gone into this was people would be recruited to come into the Usability lab to test out prototypes for this service. And one lady came in, she knew that she'd been recruited for something to do with the carers allowance, but she didn't understand what could possibly be done in an hour. So she was recruited for an hour, but she said, I had no idea what this is going to be about because the carers allowance takes about a week to apply for, not an hour. And by the end of it, she couldn't believe that it was done. So I'm going to play you another video here.
Is a benefit that's provided to people who are really deserving in society. These are people who are looking after friends and family that are very ill, in some cases terminally ill, and it's providing them with an income to help support the cost of caring for that individual. When having to deal with all these problems and all the other strife that's going on in their lives, being able to claim carers allowance should be the least of their worries.
The new service is to enable people to claim carers allowance online, which is a much quicker and easier process than using the paper form.
We've been able to remove 170 questions from the process, that's 49%. And we've done that because we've challenged the way that the policy has been interpreted on the claim form.
Make sure that the customer can understand and progress through the claim, giving us the right information to make a quick decision on their application.
We've simplified things and cut things back to just the bare information that customers need, and we've done that via our user testing and research.
The service would not be up and running without the user research, and to make sure that the participants, the carers' voice is at the heart of everything that we do. We've had people, less confident users, who by the time they get from the start of the claim through to the end, you can see them that they say, that's so much better than I expected, I will go away and do that on my own now. It's been so good.
Carers are busy people, and these are some of the most vulnerable people in society, so if we're supporting them by providing a reasonably easy method of claiming carers allowance, then that to me has got to be a good thing, because that's what we're here to do.
So 3 key things that happen there. The first thing is that they worked so hard to reduce the number of questions. So we can all remember that when we'd study at university, I personally found it much more difficult to come under the word limit than to write more. So if you're interpreting policy, it's easy to overwrite and write too many questions. So they worked really, really hard, the content designers, to bring down the number of questions so that it was much easier for the user to complete it. And they also focused just so relentlessly on user needs, testing and testing over and over again to make sure that it was an easier and smoother process for carers to access the carers allowance that they were entitled to. And this was a really successful program in the sense that it saved a lot of money, weekly even, for the calls and casework that was coming up for the carers allowance. So less people needed to call up and ask for help. So it really reduced the cost of the service overall. And another really important performance indicator for this one is that the number of successful claims was actually going up. So people who were more entitled to it were able to access it easily. Final example I'm going to use here is for lasting power of attorney. So what this is in the UK, I'm sure there are similar services around the world like this, is that if you are in a situation of perhaps being towards the end of your life or just following an accident or an illness, it can be very important to transfer the maintenance of your general administration. You can transfer that responsibility legally to someone else. So again, like the carers allowance, this is a very sensitive service and you're dealing with users in a very sensitive situation. So it's really crucial to be able to reduce the stress levels and reduce the amount of hassle that users would have to go through in order to access this successfully. Final video here.
Thank you. I'm 67 and I've done the lasting power of attorney for my mother. My mum's grasp on modern day living as it was a bit limited, so it was decided then that I would pay all the bills, sort everything out for her. 3 years ago I had a stroke, and you start thinking about your own mortality and you start thinking about, well, if something had have happened to me, then how would Mum have coped, what would have happened? Anyway, looking on the internet, and I literally stumbled across the government site for the lasting power of attorney. Started to look at it and I thought, this is good, because you can download all the paperwork yourself, you don't need a solicitor. And the instructions that went with each section of the lasting power of attorney, they were in proper people speak, not in legal jargon, so it was very easy for me to follow it. If I can do it, anybody can do it, you know. It's easy. The written instructions, you just can't go wrong. And I would say now to anybody, don't be frightened, don't worry about going to see a solicitor. Do it yourself. I'm glad I did it, and I'm glad I did it when I did it, and my mum's really pleased. And can I say thank you? I just want to say thank you to everybody involved in doing the website, because it's given me peace of mind, and I'm sure it gives a lot of people peace of mind. And my friend now is doing that, and you've made it so simple and so easy for anybody to do. And I just hope that anybody who sees this film, please do it, and you'll feel so relieved afterwards. You know, it's great to know that the people you care for, everything's looked after for. Thank you.
Okay, so that was the lasting power of attorney. So these were some of the key examples from the transformation programme. The objective initially was to transform 25 services to live. In the end, you've seen some of the better examples. Not all of them got to live. We got 15 to live in the end, so we're quite happy with that. And 2 of them still in alpha, 9 of them are still in beta. So we're really, really thorough about the stages that services go through before they get launched to live. So a key thing that came out of the transformation programme, going and working with the different departments that work with these services, these sensitive services like you've seen, also services like universal credit, so people trying to access benefits like job seekers allowance or tax credits, is that the same problems were coming up again and again. So in order to access government services, in order to put these things online, a really integral part of that is that you have to be sure that the person sitting at the computer is who they say they are. If that's for something like lasting power of attorney or accessing universal credit or renewing your passport or claiming your tax online, getting your tax back. So these same problems were coming up in all the different services, and services were having to kind of start from scratch to solve their own problems. So we noticed that services were trying to fix the same things again and again. And that's when government as a platform was built, or GAP. So government as a platform is housed at GDS now, since the transformation programme, and is really about a set of shared components that services can use so they don't have to start from scratch to solve these same problems. There is one way that is being developed to verify your identity online that can just be used by services that need that level of assurance to be able to have this service online. Developing one way for citizens to pay for things online, for example, in tax, if you owed some tax, we're developing one way for people to be able to pay for that. And notify is another one, so that's when service teams have to contact citizens, and we're developing one way for them to notify, one programme that all services can then use. So GAP is a really integral thing that's come out of the transformation programme. We're also developing open registers, so there's one list of various types of data that service teams might need. For example, the countries in the world, we're just making sure that there's the same lists are being used by service teams around the country. So when we talk about services, we've been talking a lot about services, is that we need to make sure that the service itself is really how the user sees it. It's not how the government sees it. A service is something that helps someone to do something. So if you look at this thing, this is a statutory off-road vehicle notification, if you remember. So that you can think is very much how the government sees what is happening. The government wants this thing that is a declaration that a vehicle is off the road. And this really isn't how a user or a citizen would see the service. Citizens see services more like this, so like verbs. I want to start a business, or buy a car, or employ someone, or look after children. So we think of good services are verbs and bad services are nouns. So nouns are things like statutory off-road notifications. Good services, things like renew my passport, notify, pay, verify. So we're really trying to, everything down to the name of the service, trying to think of it from the user's perspective. So now I'm going to talk to you a bit about the resources, more resources that are used by teams around the country to develop these services. So when a service has been designed, journeys have been designed, and best practice, you could say, develops of how the navigation of particular journeys, they go into things called design plans. And we publish these, and they're updated all the time. We also have a service manual. So I talked about the discovery, alpha, beta, live. So in the service manual, you'll find guidance on what to do at each stage of the service development. And this is really important for something that we have called service assessments, which get you to each stage. So it's the the checkpoint to just check that you're up to date on everything before you go into each stage. So you can use the service manual, the service teams can use the service manual to make sure they're meeting those standards. It's also guidance and resources for particular roles, like if I'm a user researcher, I might go to the service manual to look for some advice on how to conduct user research in a particular scenario. The same goes for developers and product managers. The service manual is housed at GDS, and it's a team in itself, and it has its own user researchers. So the service manual user researchers go out to teams and find out how can this be improved to help you develop your service. We also have GitHub, so the developers publish their code for the services that they're developing, and that's updated all the time. We have a public performance platform, and they are in rediscovery at the moment to understand what are the most useful and important key performance indicators for different services to be publishing against. So it really depends on the service. So not just services that we focus on, it's also products such as Verify, Notify, Pay, registers, open registers, and common technology is also something that's focused on at GDS. So making sure that, say, for example, buildings around the country that are trying to develop these services have the right access to Wi-Fi, and some of those just quite basic things. So this is just a photo I quite like of inside GDS. We've got lots of different designers, so we've got interaction designers and graphic designers and people that all come under designers at GDS. They work in products that are developed in an agile fashion, so that's teams work in very short sprints and release updates regularly. And a good thing about agile is that it's very responsive to change. So being a user researcher, it's great working with agile teams, because if you discover something that needs to be changed or improved, it doesn't take very long for that change to then go into production, providing you can, of course, show the right evidence that that change needs to be made. We have a list of design principles that we work with, and I'll read them out. Starting with user needs is number one, doing less. So I've spoken about really bringing down the amount of content that is used. Designing with data, so using the performance platform for designing. Doing the hard work to make it simple. That applies to content design, but also applies to user research, as I'm going to talk about in a minute. Iterate and iterate again, never really stop changing it. This is for everyone, so making sure that it's accessible to all people of all levels of literacy. Understanding the context, building a digital service, not a website, being consistent, not uniform, and making things open makes them better. So when we think about user experience, we really think of it as everyone's responsibility in the team. We don't have user experience designers or user experience researchers, because we think it can be counterproductive to think that user experience is the responsibility of one or two people in the team to argue for the needs of the user. So we really think of user experience to be the responsibility of everyone in the team, the product owners, the web developers, the business analysts, and the user researchers all need to think about user experience when they're delivering their work. Okay, so I'm going to talk you through some research that I've conducted recently. So as a user researcher, I want to help my team learn about users so that we can make a better service. So I work on one of those products that I mentioned called Verify. And the really interesting thing about working on Verify is that I don't work on a particular service, I worked on something that's involved in lots of services. So if I want to go and see people using Verify for real, not brought into a usability lab, is that we need to go to the place where they would be accessing that service. So I mentioned before a service called Universal Credit that is a new system being phased into the country for people trying to access various kinds of benefits. And one of the places that people go to access this, if they don't have their own technology at home, or even if they do, they go to this place called a job centre. So what we did is we went to a job centre and we invited people over to come and try to use Verify in front of us, so that we could learn what the problems were that they were having. And an interesting thing that kept coming up was there was this question, well, there are a number of questions in the service, in the product, asking kind of what you have on you. So, do you have a passport? Do you have a driving license? Do you have a mobile phone? And because this is quite a high motivation service, people weren't answering the question as authentically as they maybe needed to, because then later on in the journey, what they answered would affect what they had to do. So what we were able to do is gather this kind of evidence that some of the questions in our product just weren't being answered properly in real life for whatever reason. So then we could go back to GDS, back to the team, and iterate on it to improve how the questions were asked. This is one of them being brought into the lab. One of the questions being brought into the lab. We iterated on this a few times to try and help people to make a more authentic choice when they were being asked this question. So another thing to take into account is that people might, so what came up in this question was that people might not have the same access to technology as that you would assume. The people who are building these online products and services, they would often fall into kind of this end of the bell curve of, access to technology. People who are designers, we want to make sure people are not designing for themselves, and that they're designing for people who have all kinds of digital literacy and all kinds of access to technology. So, I'm going to take you through a few tips that I like to think of for making user research central to the team that you're working in. So when we talk about these small teams that we have at GDS, they can be made up of many different kinds of disciplines. So service designers, content designers, business analysts, front-end developers, product owners, web ops. And being a user researcher, you don't want to be the only person that's kind of fighting or being the voice of the user and making sure that people are all being responsible for user experience. So what's really important is you're making user research central to the team that you're working on. And there's various ways that you can do this. At GDS, you'll see written on the blog, as I've said, you start with user needs, you focus on user needs. Because actually what you really need to do is focus on the needs of your team. So you need to make sure that people in the team are feeling that their questions are being answered in user research, that you're there to be able to help them to do their job more easily. So one thing you can do is find out what the team wants to know. So go to them and ask them, what are your questions? Don't worry about it being an answerable research question. That's the researcher's job. So go to your team, people in your team, and say, if you could wave a magic wand and find out anything that you wanted, what would it be? So we sometimes hold these research question workshops with teams to find out what they want to know. Forcing the team to take notes. So when you invite people along to your usability tests or to your research, people can come in and they might get a bit bored or start checking emails or something. So you give people jobs to do. So I find is really successful in getting people engaged in the user research. So forcing the team to take notes. Make the team retell the stories. So if people have come to watch user research, get them to play it back to the rest of the team. Get them to recall what they saw in the research that day or the next day when you do playback together. Let the team do the analysis. So if you do a usability test with, say, 6 users, then each team member might come and take notes for one of those tests, so it's just an hour, and then all get together the next morning, get them to retell the stories, and then get them to do the analysis together. There are various methods that you can use if people didn't have all the time to give to user research. because they might not think it's their job. You can do things like give people post-its, what went well, what didn't go well, what would you change next time. But really getting your team to understand that the research is about meeting their needs as well. Prioritisation is a big thing, something that I feel like I've learned a lot about in the past year working at GDS. Researchers can go off and do some research and come back with 100 problems. I've written similar research reports myself, but if you go to a team with 100 problems, that's just not very helpful at all. Teams need to understand that you're coming to them with a short list of solvable problems. So learning to prioritise what are the issues, what things can be improved, are really important. Get used to saying no solutions. So you can guarantee you in research, if someone sees a problem, they can tell you what the solution is to that problem. That's the way that we're kind of wired to analyse solutions. So as a researcher, you have to get used to saying to people, no solutions, until we've done the analysis, we've prioritised the problems, and then we can come up with the solutions to fix those problems. Doing the grunt work as a researcher, so things like the administration, things like recruitment, collecting post-its, that's not fun, and that's not the team's job. That's not making user research teams for. That's kind of, we think that's the researcher's job. So if you want to make it fun and enjoyable for the team, then do the grunt work of the research work to get people more involved. Establish a regular research rhythm. We do research every 2 weeks at GDS, so it's easy to kind of follow these principles once, but getting into a rhythm with them is the more difficult thing. So if you can get into a research rhythm of doing it every 2 weeks, then you get in line with that agile development process. Bribe people with treats, I think always works. Somehow, coffees, donuts, milkshakes, whatever it is to make the research environment a fun and interesting one for your team is how you make user experience everyone's responsibility. So we talked about making user research central to the team that you're working in. This is often a thing that people set out to do, but is not so easy to achieve. So what can be helpful is if you kind of flip your perspective and you think about making the team that you're working in central to user research. And that's how you really get user experience, how you get everyone in the team interested in user experience. So very finally, I'm going to talk to you a bit about the culture at GDS. More slightly. So it's really important at GDS that we feel that people feel very comfortable and that people know that diversity is something that's really highly valued and something that's very highly valued and something that we really champion at GDS. The LGBT group and the women's group are very active. We want people to be in an environment where they know that they can talk very openly and freely about challenges that they're having, because working in government services can be really challenging. We have stickers, like mission patches. If you've completed a piece of work, sticker on my laptop. We have posters all over the place, things like this one that says, things for new people, like it's okay to say, I don't know, it's okay to not check your email after work, it's okay to sit at your desk, or whatever you like. These are all online, published online. Really into making things open, upholding transparency. This is a picture that I took last week. Beside the elevators on the third floor. It's the latest digital transformation strategy that the strategy team at GDS have worked out. And they've printed it out and stuck it on the wall. It can't be published publicly yet, but it's there for us to kind of critique. And some of the stuff on the post-its are, people might be frustrated with this thing, or they think that's been said before. But it's that message from people, high up in GDS who are working on the strategy that actually it's really about including everyone's perspective and including the staff in these kind of decisions. And that is ultimately how we think we can transform government together. So, thank you. no one knows how it can be useful for the government business. What are the very first steps in the UK to make the world happen? That's a really good question I really like, having studied anthropology. I think I can answer that question best just talking about my personal experience having joined GDS. So what were the very first steps in the UK to make the awareness higher? I don't know what the very first steps were, but I knew that I was hired as a user researcher and I was hired on a post-live product. So it was a product that was in doing a lot of usability testing. And really I feel the thing about anthropology and ethnography is that if you use the right tools to capture the data, such as videos, photos, really strong like storytelling, then that can really speak for itself. So the difference in research methods, such as say usability testing, it's quite, well, it's easier to kind of get your team to come in to the lab and sit in the observation room. But if you're going out and doing ethnographic research, it's much more difficult to set up some kind of situation where you can have an audience and you can get people to see for themselves what the value is for that. So when I came to GDS and wanted to do participant observation in job centres, very light ethnography, you can say, having photos and videos were just very, very important for that. And then kind of went to the product and showed them the work that we'd done and just showed them that it's not as difficult as you think. It's not very expensive, you don't have to pay for a lab. So I would just say making sure that you're capturing data visually as you can, really integral for getting built up in my product. I hope that's answered the question as best I can. In-house team have a company do outsource to an external agency. So GDS, the way GDS works, everything is built in-house. So we really try, we do still do some external stuff. Yeah, we do still do some, but the fundamental mission of GDS is to bring everything in-house. So that cut out those levels of bureaucracy, increase the amount of control we have and ownership we have over products being built. That's a really good question. How much functionality has changed after alpha and in beta testing? So it depends on the product, but that would be an indefinite amount. So lots of things are still changed after live. Things can just continue to change and change and change. Whereas during beta, you're under more, in order to meet the standards to go to live, you might have to do more changes in order to get to that standard. But, so yeah, a considerable amount of functionality can be changed. On the post-live products I work on now, if I can go into old files of screenshots and look at what it looked like a year ago or 2 years ago, and it looks completely different. It looks very, very different. Kind of unrecognizable. Okay. What was the strategy to define the services with the highest value? I suppose, answer this as best I can, looking at number of users. So quite big services have been transformed. Service under the department DVLA, so that's driving and vehicles agency. And universal credit is like potentially 10 million people. So seeing the number of users and then the amount that's spent on calls and casework. So calling up because you have a problem. So what going by how many users there are, and then how many of those users are having problems with the service as it is now, was part of driving, getting the online journey to be the more practical one. Okay. Yeah.
someone. First one.
Okay. In your opinion, could you try to describe major things that started the changes in the UK? I suppose you could say a frustration with how things were, and that report from Martha Lane Fox really did set out the big change in the field of e-government. She was really leading by example, you could say, in the fact that it was such a short report, and that it wasn't about this whole idea of revolution or evolution. It was really integral to it. Just the idea that we need to stop looking at how things are now and try and just improve, but to just completely think outside the box in some way for what e-government could look like. So that was probably the real catalyst for getting that change in e-government. Okay, thanks. No one has any more questions?